This is the nephew observability meetings for, what is today? March 26, 2024. Okay, I guess before we get started, does anyone have anything they want to talk about for today? Okay. If not, so 2 weeks ago, I think with our last meeting, we were talking about talking about something more simplistic as the first milestone. Let's put up the OTel collector as a proxy collector, actually, and bring up just UPF, and then we'll be able to collect stats, metrics, and maybe traces even, and send it to a sample applications. We spent a lot of time talking about the Kata, I think. I thought about it. I actually did some investigations after there was Kata has a page on OTel integrations, but then it was actually the reverse of what we think it is. It was we thought it would be an injection of metrics into Kata so that they can do something in terms of automatically upgrade scaling up pods, but it's actually the other way around. They're exposing metrics to OTel on that sample, so it's actually not tremendously useful in that case. I'm also at the opinions after thinking about it that we may not be focusing on making that integrations, even though I think the point that Vim made, Vim's not here, but the point that he made that it is interesting to make a well-known applications will be able to send metrics over to an applications that we know depends on metrics to operate. But then, given that it takes actions, my take would be if it's needed as an action pod for, say, service assurance, then perhaps the service assurance team should take on that rather than us, doing in specific applications to make it work. I don't have a major preference for one side or another, but then it's just, it seems to have an extra dependencies for us when we really don't have that many contributors on making things happen. In any case, for me, I canceled a meeting last week, obviously, because I was working on something internal for actually the week prior to that week, and then I wasn't able to do anything with actually any nephew related things at all during the time. So both this and the STA meetings I actually sort of canceled. And since then, I brought up the OTel collector on a clusters. I'm more or less just playing around with it now. It's not like I'm doing a lot with this. The exploration really is to try to explore. Well, what can it do? Because I can't say I'm an OTel expert per se. So I do want to explore how to configure set of pipelines. Particularly interesting is the processors allowing you to add attributes to traces, metrics, and logs, so it can correlate directly through processors. So one thinking that I have, for example, would be adding attributes to the input to know that this comes from a particular network functions that was deployed as part of an NF deployment object. So you can maybe tag an NF deployment name. But even that has a very strong implications that we somehow had that information somewhere that could be used in a processor. So I'm still just trying to see what it does, and beyond the simple stuff like printing out spans um, on traces. I like to get hold of what they do. It also comes with a set of Kubernetes related attribute processors that allows us to get informations about nodes if you do a daemon set. And a real deployments would be monitoring clusters related things. So those are interesting informations and metrics, telemetry informations to collect. And again, this is more for correlation purposes. Well, I mean, it's nice to see them being exposed, but then at the same time, for our particular use case, for now, we do want to get informations about no CPU load and things like this, just directly from Kubernetes, um, and well, containers and things related information also. So those are things that I'm trying to. So this is basically this block over here, and then these receiving applications. It could be anything. I think last time I had the diagram. I had it on an operator, which I guess semi controversial because I think Vim more than anyone was taking that as a way that we're trying to build a super operator, which isn't really a case. It's just that more or less I would like to have a standard ways, if you will, for any sample applications to receive metrics or any visibility data through OTel, through the OTel collectors that we'll install as part of Nephew. And gRPC would be a simple way to stream it, or even Kafka if you really want to be fancy. I don't know what that is yet, but then we do want to have a more standard ways where someone who's writing anything at all on a workload clusters would be able to just create we can give them a code block. We may even pipe it into SDK, and then within that code block, they'll be able to get visibility data that we collect. So those are some of the things that I've been working on, mainly focusing on this. Get some good understanding on it. I think more than anything is just understand what it does first, and then see how it maps into what we're doing. So what we're doing basically is just taking the UPF data and then expose that UPF related data to someone who and sample applications that understand FreeFileGC related metrics or visibility data again, which basically is almost nothing from UPF other than logs. So this is more for something like, hey, you can use these mechanisms to subscribe to what we're collecting as our framework. So in terms of the other pieces that we're thinking of doing, I guess Marcin is looking at the BPF and various different things that are collecting. I guess the generating data. So FreeFileGC UPF by default, outside of logs, expose almost nothing to the outside. So Marcin's nice enough to volunteered to look into different ways of getting some hopefully relevant informations off of UPF and actually various different things, but at least for now UPF. So I guess we haven't seen actually a write up from Marcin that just if you can like briefly describe or somewhat describe or even in detail describe what you're working on in terms of getting informations from FreeFileGC. that would be great.
Sure. I mean, as far as so there are a few interesting projects here. As far as OpenTelemetry goes, the automatic Go instrumentation only gives you traces. So I'm not sure if we're that interested in traces for, let's just say, for the first POC.
Yeah.
But there is another project. Otel also has. Yeah. Did somebody say anything or?
Oh yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh yeah. And then there's also a project called Network Observability, which is basically the Otel guys' own eBPF-based looking into the network as a whole. And this one might be more interesting. They have like 22 metrics, mostly focused on TCP, UDP, HTTP, DNS latency based, the usual that you get with eBPF. And you can basically set it up to get the connection stats for a service to service, pod to pod, process to process. So this one might be more interesting. I'm not really sure if we will need it. But you can deploy it relatively easily, and it gives a ton of telemetry data. So those are two comments, and then also the third comment from my side. You mentioned gathering information from nodes with OpenTelemetry collector, I think.
Yeah, the Kubernetes. The Kubernetes sets. Oh, actually, yeah. So the daemon set has supposedly, I haven't brought it up yet on my cluster, but then supposedly their daemon set collect data from the nodes. So I would, I don't know what the details of what the data, the telemetry data is actually exposed.
I think that Piotr and Ivana will probably back me up, but from my limited experience, the overlap between what you can get from hotels this way and the Prometheus Kube Prometheus stack is pretty big, and Prometheus is way easier to set it up than Hotel does. So if it is something that Kube Prometheus stack can provide, then I'd vote for just using it that way.
I see. Okay. But then in that case, okay, so in this case, you have Prometheus collecting the node and the node related stats or telemetry data. And then the idea would be to actually go directly into Prometheus if anyone in every application actually wants to fetch it.
I mean, where we store the data is of course not decided yet, right? It's just I'm in the topic of sourcing the data, actually getting it right. The Kube Prometheus stack has been way easier to set it up than the Hotel collectors have.
Okay.
Let me comment. I'm not sure if Prometheus is the best way to collect. Probably it is a good way because it's easier. But of course, if you will be able to set up the auto collector itself to collect the node data in an efficient way, that would be also good because never mind if it's collected by Prometheus or auto, it's a good idea to put it through the auto for the processor part, right?
Yeah. So that's what I try to explore, because to have to have the same hotel collectors able to get that information, and then we have the freedom.
As I can see, we can have Prometheus collecting the metrics and pushing to the collector as a demo set, or we can have the auto collectors as a demo set collecting metrics and pushing to the, let's say, deployment collector where the processor will be running, and then from there we can put them to the backend other Prometheus. I don't know, the same Prometheus, or if in terms of hierarchical, I mean, the multi-cluster use case, there may be, for example, the push to the Mimir from Grafana. But I believe it will be crucial for the metrics to go through the processors itself to enrich or remove irrelevant data.
No, I agree actually. So not to say something against Marcin, but then so I try to explore that too. So that's the next thing supposed to be done. So these are infra data, and then the thing I'm trying right now is on the applications, pulling stuff directly from applications. But if we're going through the same collector, and then going through the same, the processor would probably be slightly different for what it does. But then again, we still in the exploration phase in terms of understanding what kind of things are useful, because it's observability by itself, as many people said, is a wild card. We can't simply just grab everything, but we do want to have a sample apps to allow us to say we're only interested in certain things, and then be able to actually deliver that to the applications locally on a cluster in this case. So if we have to
for the specific use case, we need to select some tools. But in the concept point of view, it doesn't matter if it will be Prometheus or Auto or both. The only idea is to have metrics which are not overlapping and make it efficient. So you have the framework that something is collecting the metrics from the infrastructure and this is a good output, and then you would like to show the proof of concept. So you can select Prometheus or Auto, but the one can select the other tool if it's enough for him. But the framework is on the plate.
Yeah. No, yeah, right. So it's important that the POC is showing that we have the framework, the basic framework that allows us to expose the data that otherwise we don't have freely off of Refugee. And then for the other end, exporting it to applications that are saying that I'm specifically interested in something in X, Y, and Z. So how do we don't even know how to express that, I'm interested in X, Y, and Z yet. But before we get there, at least we have the pipeline set up so that the sample apps can actually receive it. So that's basically the idea. But UPF is at this point networking informations, as Marcin said in that case. So have you so in this case the OTel, as you said, the OTel network observer is the one that you were looking at, Marcin, and in terms
I
of
mean,
getting...
there is a ton of projects like that, right?
Okay.
Microsoft had their own released a few days ago. The Grafana bailout also gives us some insight. It comes down to what we need or what we want. And then a lot of these projects are actually invasive in a way that they impose their own requirements, but the ones that are linked aren't. And I've looked at the service assurances docs, because they seem to talk a lot about observability on their meetings, but I'll be honest, I haven't attended the last few of them to remind myself whether or not we have any concrete requirements, because I do remember that there was an idea of gathering some metric regarding the UPF from the run part. So if so basically, what are we trying to get from the kernel using eBPF would be my question, because to be entirely honest, I sort of forgot if we had any concrete requirements.
Yeah, so in terms of the first thing that I always thought of is we want to observe enough to understand whether or not we can meet the intent, and then right now the intents that we express through NF deployment are all configuration data, or all configurations related parameters, except there's a capacity field. So can we meet the capacity? Can we estimate and we meet the capacity? That by itself is a lot of processing. So I can't say for sure that getting the data is one important aspect of making that decisions. So at this point, the one requirements, the very vague preliminary thinking is, can we measure throughput of the secondary interfaces on UPF pod?
This could be, yeah. I mean, we did sort of do this, right? Way back in like November. The question is whether because Prometheus had it. I remember for sure they had a metric that basically allowed to see what the throughput was for a given interface, and it supported secondary interfaces as well. I
Okay.
remember posting a screenshot like that on Slack way back from
Yeah.
Open5GS, but
Mhm.
the Prometheus metric was, let's just say, implementation language agnostic. And as far as the other two capacity goes, I remember now,
Mhm.
we had the subscribers information from the FreeFiveGC API,
Mhm.
and then the SMF's number of
Sessions.
UPFs connected or sessions.
Mhm.
This, I mean, there is perhaps this could be measured to some degree with there are also metrics that basically go into how many TCP connections there are. Maybe you could filter through those. Maybe the interface stats could also be helpful here. But I don't actually. Is like a was that metric that I mean I posted way back regarding the throughputs good enough?
Yeah, I don't
Or
think we have it on Slack anymore, unfortunately.
oh, there's like a time
Yeah.
limit. I forgot, and
Yeah,
we're in March
it's
already.
getting shorter and shorter because I think we've been using the free tier for long enough that they're getting a little more a little less friendly, if you will.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
All right, so I mean, okay, so I guess it comes down to how precise does it need to be, right? Because okay, so let's just
Well, let's say
for the
we
sake
want to
of
do we want to correlate, right? So we are. I mean, we don't know, but then we don't even have a really strong test bed to basically pump enough traffic to make that distinctions. But let's say, for argument's sake, if we want to correlate the CPU utilization, CPU and memory utilizations of the UPF pod with the secondary interface throughput for both up and down. So well, particularly N6 and 3, and how they're doing, and yeah, and that will be one part, right? They'll be able to fetch that and see whether or not there is a hotspot at a certain point that maybe we are a certain throughput, we start seeing CPU issues or things like this. So do we well? So that basically we're telling you that maybe a time series type fetch would be useful. Yeah, go ahead, Martin.
it's actually funny that you mentioned that because I do have a test bed, although it was created for the European project. But I mean, maybe what I do have is something like this. I'm not sure if you can see that. This is in Polish. This was a presentation for a completely different reason. But can you see the screen?
No, I cannot.
You cannot. All right, that's interesting.
I
Okay. I get it. Okay, the Zoom screen sharing is a bit interesting. You can see this, right?
Yeah, now I can see it.
I mean, it is Open5GS based, but the resources should be there. You have a few traffic generators to choose from. You do have the Prometheus stack, some chaos engineering. You do have a time series database. So I'm not sure if we actually could use that, but perhaps some of the configuration files that were used here could be reused again. So there have been some attempts to create a testbed like that from my side, although for completely different reasons.
Okay.
Yeah,
the traffic
and
generators, are they commercials? Are they open source?
two are open source and two are commercial. Actually, one isn't even pictured. From my experience, right, the UE run seam doesn't actually provide
Yeah,
as
you know,
much
it's not a
firepower.
it's not a load generating.
Yeah, but I
Yeah.
mean, there have been the Hewlett-Packard Enterprise have come up with Packet Rasher, which is basically a rehashed version of their previous one. It was called something like 5G Tester or something along those lines. And Packet Rasher is, in theory, supposed to be able to simulate up to 100,000 UEs at the same time. I mean, it works for some of the more basic procedures. That much I can tell you. And then the other two are commercial. And so I will probably not be going in depth in, but I mean, Packet Rasher remains at this point probably the most promising load generator as far as 5G goes.
Okay.
Yeah, so you could probably replicate parts of this, or although I imagine maybe the resources could be an issue here, as I am pretty sure that I cannot reuse those that have been used to create this testbed for Nephew purposes.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, something like this. There have been attempts to do this. Somebody said something, or am I
Go ahead. Did
mistaken?
anyone make a comment?
I think so, but I cannot hear anyone anymore.
No, neither could I. There was just some noise.
So basically, to some degree, perhaps some of the configuration files could be reused at least for a testbed like this.
Okay. I mean, we never talk about load tests, but then if we use UPF, then we want to see if there's any things that we can actually measured during that time. Obviously, everything could be simulated in terms of the applications. To say, oh, if it's 2 sessions already, and then, or 100 megabits per second already, and it's time to die, then we can. There's some simulations that we can do, but the actions is less important to us than being able to see the data coming in, the telemetry data coming in, and be able to have the applications able to subscribe to them. Okay. So today, so in that case, your OTel net collectors network, that it will be exposing everything through the OTLP or whatever, or the protocol, right? So these are things that the collector would naturally be able to collect, I'm guessing.
Probably. I am not actually sure. I haven't gone as much in depth. I can figure this out, of course, but can't answer you yet.
So right now, when you're testing your test bed, you were looking at them through Prometheus, basically, or the more normal collectors.
The testbed picture it does not actually have these two OTel projects. So these are separate, just to clarify. But once again, for what we've mentioned, right, for the capacity, probably the network observability project won't even be needed. Maybe to gain some additional insight, not sure. I mean, because I do see that the Slack messages are gone, basically, from way back when we talked about this. But I do remember having some notes about this, so maybe I'll just see in the meantime, after the meeting, if I can retrieve those, and if these, let's just say, metrics are precise enough for this use case or not.
Okay. Yeah, but then, well, okay. So if you've done some investigations, because right now we don't know what kind of data we actually needed really, per se. But then what kind of data are you getting off of something like the OTel network collectors, the network? Is it?
One second, I can link the docs with the metrics. Give me a second. Here you go. I linked those. But once again, if we don't need such a project, then I am probably against including it because from what I've gathered, it's basically a sure way to generate a ton of telemetry data. The problem is that one of those components that they have, you can configure the, let's just say, granularity level for what actually those metrics will be collected, but it's not very easy to filter through it. This would probably require some component that would, let's just say, filter through what we're actually getting, just to, well, it generates a ton of
So that's just
telemetry
flooding.
data.
They're flooding the collector
Yeah,
with
yeah,
a
yeah,
bunch
exactly.
of data.
Yeah.
And then the filtering would be someone else's problem.
Yep.
Okay.
Something like that.
Yeah. So there's no config for them to say, oh, I'm only interested in this interface or that interface.
Yeah, it's very limited.
Interesting. And in that case, they're running. Oh, go ahead, Saga.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, I mean, whatever we do, how are we gonna make sure that it's gonna work for different types of UPF which are built on different technologies, Like say if there is a UPF which uses DPDK, right? And in DPDK you cannot use the classic networking tools like Linux, classic Linux tools, right?
Right.
So how are we gonna measure their throughput? I mean, till the time that let's say the UPF is using the Linux stack, then it's fine. It's easy. We can use, let's say, classic tools like IP or something like that.
Yeah.
Same for eBPF also, we can measure because I think all the UPFs which are out there, they do have some sort of way of doing it. And probably they can also integrate inside their own UPFs. But for DPDK kind of UPS, how are we going to do? Because the commercial UPFs, they mostly use DPDK today.
Right.
I mean, and some of them they use also P4, but there are not many of them.
So no. I don't want us to misclassify that for us having a metrics collecting or metrics exposing agent of some sort. That would be the standard upon which all the NF vendors must use. This is based on the fact that we don't have anything good from FreeFiGC, and therefore we'll basically attach something that existing, in Marcin's case, existing projects that we could use to get that information. I would imagine. So it goes down to our CLDs, our CLs. The CLs sort of expose the idea that you would, if you're UPF, you have to expose the throughput informations, and we're expecting to get that exposed from the commercial vendors. So commercial vendors would be exposing it through their own means. The only thing we're asking is it will be an OTel interface, so something that OTel collectors will be able to collect. And again, we don't, at this point anyway, I know opinions varies, but at this point we're not in the business of normalizing the incoming visibility data in standardizing in a certain form or whatever. So it is also the application that subscribe to those data is their problem if they have to understand vendor specific metrics and so on, and traces or logs.
Okay, got your point. Got it.
So right here, this is a reference implementations that we're doing, and then it will be collected by N applications, whoever it is, and then if it's an operator, which is what I was advocating earlier, although there were some opposition on that, NF operator, then that operator would be will may be able to have some sort of standard API ways of this is tapping onto. So Nefio by default would be creating this OTel collectors, will be installing and bring up this OTel collectors with our set of processors and so on already configured, and then this is we'll expose a set of API or something to allow other NF operators, if they want to, to be able to get informations in addition to what their own metrics and logs and so on, which I would imagine they know how to collect. They would also be able to get to the more infrastructure level informations for their benefits. So that was the goal. But then in terms of using BPF to get network data off of kernel only in this case, that would mainly be due to the fact that we are, at least for 3.5GC, we're dealing with something that isn't exposing anything useful, and therefore we just want to have a way to get the information that isn't fake, which was actually being suggested when we started, and be able to have, going through this framework, that we to have it and applications be able to get that info. Go ahead, Pietro.
Just wanted to comment because I believe this is a really good question, because it's more realistic scenario to describe using DPDK rather than some CNI in the Kubernetes. So it's relevant. And I'm not an expert in the eBPF, but the truth is that in the eBPF you have kprops in the kernel, but you could also utilize uprobes, I believe, for the user space. So I'm not saying at this point that it is the solution, but probably it might be a solution to collect some metrics from from data which is not going through the kernel.
Yeah, I mean, you can tab onto a socket, for example. You can have a sock map on a socket, and that would be one way to also get data off of the through PPF. But then again, the goal isn't to say we whatever we're doing here, the end vendors, we hope they could leverage it. We hope they're useful. But then we are not saying that you must do this. Neither and nor are we saying that you must expose this standard set of metrics, because there are really not a lot of standard ones, I would say. So we're having a framework to collect. We are having a way to export to whatever the end applications is, to be able to interpret that set of, I would say, probably very vendor specific metrics, data. And we're not doing any massaging outside of maybe like tag it into this belongs to this NF deployment and so on. Possibly, even that may not be very trivial. Actually, we want to see what the use case is before actually doing the work. Okay. So okay, cool. So the idea would be, we are obviously in execution phase. So once we have the OTel collectors ready, the idea would be bring up UPF and subsequently AMF and SMF, and have a test bed where we are setting up calls and pumping traffic through, and then write a dummy endpoint applications. And again, for me, it's easy to just do it on the 3.5GC operator directly, to be able to subscribe, if you will, that set of data. And so the only interface I actually need from that point from Martin would be something that an OTel collector would be able to collect. So, for example, on the one that I brought up. Yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, another thing, just came with my mind. So I think we haven't mentioned anywhere in things like if if we have like let's say in 5G there is NWDAP, right? NWDAP is the one which is responsible for doing all this analytics, and it gets the data. And to expose the data, there is NEF and network exposure function. It exposes the data to some other entity which wants to get the data. And this is done from more like a 3GPP point of view. That's how they described it. And now it's technology agnostic. If you implement in Kubernetes or whatever you want to implement, you can implement. It doesn't matter.
Okay.
So let's say
is there a standard protocol or something that we okay?
Yeah, NWDAP is a network function, and it's responsible for communicating with different network functions. It gets the data, and then people use the data to do all the analytics, checking on that what is the behavior of the user equipment. Let's say when a user makes a call, at what time, how much data he consumes at what hour, because they get all this data. They get when the user gets attached, then the user the throughput data of the user. So if we use something like an NWDAP, and if we are able to fetch all this data, so the NWDAP is also giving us the same data. But whereas what you are also giving is that from only an infrastructure point of view is like verifying that data, right? Verifying that data. That because NWDAP will give a throughput only for a particular user, but it won't give for all the interfaces probably, let's say, on N3, N4, N5, on N6, let's say, or N9, which are other ones. If you want, you can also do something like think about that there is already an NWDAP which is giving this data, and then NWDAP pushes this data in our telemetry system. Or if you're not covering this use case, then probably we can also mention that we are not covering it, because this way the people who are in telco, they might question this.
Okay, but then is it fully implemented, or is it just something a standard that we have to follow?
Okay, for example, like in OAI, we have an NWDAP which exposes all these information. Okay, on a basic information. I think, if I'm not wrong, probably Open5GS also has an NWDAP, and I'm not sure about P5GC. Probably they have a network function as NWDAP also. Not pretty sure. Probably if they have, they also expose all these things. So we can have a look at it if you want. We can probably just take an NWDAP and put another container in NWDAP and fetch all this information from NWDAP and push it to the telemetry system. That can also be a way forward rather than going in a UPF and just doing it, because again, it's only P5GC specific. Probably we can just try to exploit how the standard works. Let's say, if you want, I can just give some pointers also. I can write on the channel.
Yeah, that would be great. Go ahead. I think Martin has it first before Pietro.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, sure, in 5G, the NWDAF usually does this, but as far as open source goes, nobody has a working NWDAF. Okay, nobody except the OAI. The OAI, there is a 2.0 version released on GitLab as far as the NWDAF goes, but none of the other open source implementations have it. Open5GS doesn't have it, Free5GC doesn't have it. There have been some attempts in 2022 for Open5GS, but the creator of the Open5GS simply doesn't have the manpower to do that. So sure, usually, yeah, this would be done via the NWDAF, but the open source reality, from what I've seen, is that there hasn't ever been a working NWDAF, and OAI is first. Although I'm not sure how much data actually it can provide.
If I may add something, I agree that NWDAF is very important. Probably the RIC, Radio Intelligent Controller, also is important in the context of the observability. And in our minds, in Orange, we see we need to take into account to familiarize with NWDAF, to familiarize with the RIC, but it's not something you do as a first proof of concept. And the problem with NWDAF itself is that, as I know, it's the component of the core, and we would like to monitor much more, not only the 5G core, but probably 5G run. I mean, I'm talking about my goal, not about the first proof of concept, which is regarding the UPF itself, probably. So to summarize, I believe NWDAF is a good part of what we would like to deliver, or take into account, but it's not the only solution, probably, which is a remedium for every problem we may occur in our work. This is my point of view. Yes, and the good point is that I know at the end there are vendors, but for the open source projects, it's really hard to find the NWDAF or even NEF. So the question is, because the standard is the standard, but the question is how likely is that vendors will implement those components?
Yeah. Well, I mean, at least from Free5GC perspective, I know they don't have anything exposed. Hence we have the whole working group doing, well, the whole sub team doing this.
So we are working, I believe, on the framework and WDAF.
Yeah, the framework is
part of the framework.
Yeah, whether or not we hit the standards, I don't know. Whether or not Nefio would be. I mean, I'm not saying we're not interested to hit this, to fit into standards, but then obviously the priority is the software is there to actually make it happen first, and then if we have to massage it to fit the standards, that's hopefully someone will do it, but different story. Yeah, so right now, the only two pieces we're looking for the first POC is data being exposed and then data being collected so that application can consume. That's the that's the main focus really for now.
Yes, and let's ask the question, because probably the Kubernetes operators are not in the standardization of the FreeGPP. So okay, network function may use the data from NWDAF, but then it's not that clear how the operator will be an intermediate component between the NWDAF and if it makes sense at all to do something like that.
I mean, I would like to say I'm not that familiar with it, so that's why, yeah, nice if something like that exists. But then I don't even want to say I'm a Free5GC expert, but then from the experience I have with Free5GC, I just don't see anything like that existing. So
the truth is also something we should take care of is the big document describing the KPIs of the, let's say, core network functions. And the question is, if you would like to implement the standards or just show some framework. Because if you would like to follow the standard, there is a lot of KPIs.
Yeah, and I mean, at least as a community so far, it doesn't seem like Nefio community is that interested to say we are here to bridge the gap of building an open source version of the standard. At least that wasn't the intent when we found the project. Anyway, so yeah. So for now, let's just build software projects, and then get informations. We don't have a standard. We have an API. That APIs are currently we define capacity off of very simple imaginations, if you will, but then there's nothing to back them, whether or not the intent is being satisfied. So that's I thought was the missing gap from the get-go. There's obviously, once you have that information, there are a lot more use cases. But then if we can't even do that first, then all the other more advanced use cases would be kind of premature to think about. Okay, cool. So I guess we'll continue to do what we do here in terms of getting the collector up, and then I'll rely on Masen to give me data so I can collect on the hotel collector. And then at the end, write some sample apps as the first level of POC. So, okay. Any other questions? Any comments? Cool. If there's nothing else, then we get 6 minutes back. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you
See
very
you.
much.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Night. Bye.
Well, yeah, good night. Good day. Bye.